Hi, I'm John Rafrano from VASST, and welcome to Ultimate S Lite training. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Markers tab. There's lots of things you can do with markers in Vegas. We've got the ability to add them and create them in lots of interesting ways. So let's take a look. Let's start by looking at each of the areas of the Markers tab and see how they're logically laid out. In the upper left, there's loading and saving markers. Sometimes you have markers in a file. You might want to transfer them to another project, or you might want to just save them for later and bring them back again. You can load and save those markers to and from a file. Below that, there's create markers. All things about creating markers are done in this section of the interface. Then as we move along, there's the convert marker section where you can convert from one type of marker into any other type of marker. Next to that, there's removing markers. Once we create them, we have the ability to remove them in a number of ways. And then finally, we've got some editing markers down at the bottom to show you how you can edit markers in different situations. Let's start with the load save markers. I've got a project here. I'm going to just dock this for a second. I've got a project that we ended with in the last tutorial where we've got a number of markers on the timeline, and I might want to save those. So I'll click on, first we'll clear our page. I'll click on load save markers, and then I want to save them to a file. I can browse to where that file is on the hard drive. And we'll put this into, right now it's defaulting to the root. So I want to move this into my documents here. Or maybe we'll just put it on the desktop for now. So it's going to drop that onto my desktop. And then when I say apply, it has saved the markers onto my desktop. I can prove that they're saved by removing them. So we'll go over to remove, entire projects, removing the markers, clear all. And then we'll click apply here, and let me unclick load save. Oops, sorry, I have to select the markers again. I click apply, it removes all the markers on the timeline. Then we'll go back to load save markers and say get markers from a file, and click apply, and there the markers are back again. You'll notice it has this option to start at the cursor, so let me undo what I just did, and I want to place the cursor here. And then I want to start at the cursor and apply, and then it will start from the cursor and apply them. So you can use these for a number of things. You can, as I said, you can have markers saved from another project, and then import those markers into a project at any point in the project, starting at the cursor or starting at the beginning of the project. Next, we can look at all the ways that we can create markers. So let's go remove these markers again, and then move over to create markers. Now I can create markers just within a section or across the entire project. So I'm going to make a timeline selection here, and I'm going to say create markers events in this timeline selection, and at each one of these events, once it's started here at an event, it will create a marker. I'm going to select my track that I want it to happen on, and I click apply, and there we go. We've got markers within this timeline selection. Every time it encountered an event, it dropped a marker. And you'll notice it put these little chapter names on the markers because the default here was to give them a base name, and the base name was chapter. Because usually you use markers as chapter markers. So let's go back and remove these markers. And then we'll show you the different things that we can do with creating markers. For now, we'll leave it on the entire project. I can create any kind of marker that Vegas knows about, so CD markers and regions, command markers, and regular markers and regions. I have several naming conventions. I can have no name. I can decide that I just want the markers without a name. I can use the active take name in the event. So let's try that. We'll do active take names, create markers. I click apply. Did I select this? Here we go. Click apply. Oh, I also have remove selected here. So you have to watch, because Ultimate S can do multiple things at once. So I think we'll use undo from now on, which will be much safer. I'll click apply, and then it has created markers, and you notice I have the take names showing on my timeline. And so it used those take names in the marker, because that was the option that I selected. Now I can also say base name only. So without, let me do an undo here, without adding any number, it'll just say chapter, 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 or whatever name you want, right? And it puts the markers in that way. Or we can decide that we want to have the base name with a sequence number, which is what I usually like. And then when you apply them, it'll give a sequence number to the chapter. Because it was marker 5, it started at chapter 5, marker 6, chapter 6. So each of those markers, as you can see, we've got markers ahead of them here on the timeline. So that's just for creating markers at the events. We'll undo this. We could also create markers at intervals. So maybe you want to have your chapter points, if you're using markers for chapters, every 10 minutes. You want to drop a chapter point. And so I don't think we have enough video on the timeline to do 10 minutes here. So let's shorten this. So let's say we're going to do this every 30, just so it fits in. Every 30 seconds, I click apply, and then every 30 seconds there are chapter markers on the timeline. Okay, we'll undo those. Now we can evenly space any number of markers. So let's say I'm doing chapters and I say, hey, I want 10 chapter points or whatever. So here I'll say evenly space 7 markers. I click apply. It takes the length of my total length of my project, divides it evenly, and drops chapter markers that way. So you might decide you want 10, 12, however many chapters or markers in your project. Okay, we'll undo these. Now I can create regions from selected events. This is sometimes you want to quickly create regions. So I'm going to take 3 events here. I'll select this one. I'm holding the control key to select this one and select that one. And then I'm going to say create regions from these selected events. I click apply, and it has created 3 regions for me. Again, using the naming convention that we have supplied. Now, an option here is to make contiguous events into one region. So let me undo this and then show you that if I select 2 events side by side, these 2 events, and then this one and this one, it will make one region across these 2 events if I choose this option. So I'll click apply, and now the contiguous events become one region, and then any other event becomes a region that I've selected. We'll undo this. Another one is to create markers on the beats, and we use this in our tutorial on photo montage. What this does is it uses the tempo that's in the project properties. So if we open up the project properties and we go to the ruler, we'll notice the beats per minute for this project is set to 120. And if I bring my audio in the same way, so we go to Options, Preferences, on the Audio tab, we say Import Audio at Track Tempo, then all the audio that gets imported, musical audio that has acidized information in it, will come in at the project tempo. And then I can say create markers every 4 beats and apply. And when I hit the apply key, it has evenly spaced out markers on the beats. Now if I was doing that, let me undo this. I probably would not want to have a name on them, right? Creating markers on the beats and not worry about having a name. But this is a great way of, if you don't want to beat map a whole file, is to bring the file in at the project tempo and then have Ultimate S create the markers on the beats. And I did every 4 beats so that it created markers at a measure. If, let me undo, if I created it every 1 beat, then of course we would get a marker on every one of the beats. And then finally, we can create markers from embedded markers in regions. So let me get a file here. Let me just clear the project. And let's get a file that has embedded markers in it. I know in our VASST track packs, we've got embedded markers in regions. So you can see in this file, there are some embedded regions. The intro is a region, and the A and B parts are regions. And then we've got markers on every measure. And I want to then say create embedded markers in regions, and I'll select that and click apply, and then it has extracted the regions, it has extracted the markers for me, and I can even go up here to my next section and learn how to convert those. So let's say we didn't want regions, we really just wanted all these to be markers, and now I've got markers and regions. I can, again, within the entire project or just a specific timeline selection, have these work. And I want to say I want to create, convert from these regions to markers. And now when I click apply, you'll see that the regions go away and they've been converted to markers. And that's a quickly, so you can convert from anything to anything. Any of the markers that VASST understands to any of the other markers that VASST understands. Now we can also take and convert regions to chapters. So let's go back and create some regions from these markers. Now, that's probably a good number of markers. I'm going to convert from markers to regions. And I'm going to click apply. And that created regions from all these. And then, so let's say, in this case, I had a number of regions and I want to say, oh, gee, I'd like to make each one of these regions a chapter. Maybe you've gone through your file and you've mapped out different regions to be different parts of your video, and you'd like to put a chapter point at each one of those. So we'll do regions to chapters and click apply. And then each one of these has now become a chapter name, right? I could also do regions to subclips. So let's undo here. I know this is going to create a number of subclips. Now, I don't happen to have video here on the timeline. Let me put some video on the timeline. I'll go back to my Explorer. We'll go back to our Extreme video. Place that down here. And let's get rid of all these regions and just make a couple of regions so we can prove the point. So I want to unselect here, say remove markers in the entire project, and I want to remove regions in the entire project, and I click apply. All the regions are gone. I now want to create a couple of regions, so maybe we'll do a region. We'll call this intro. In this region here, jumpstart, and come here and call this landing. Now I can go back and say I want to create regions to subclips. So let me show you your project media. Project media just has my one AVI file and my music. I'll go back here and say, we'll clear all and then say regions to subclips. And when I click apply, it created subclips out of those three regions. And if I go back to my project media, you can see that intro, jumpstart, and landing are now subclips that I can take and drop on the timeline and work with. So that's kind of a handy tool if you've gone through your project and you've created regions around all the areas that you want to make subclips out of. It makes it very easy. And then finally, you can do embedded regions to subclips. So if there were, I don't believe I have any media with embedded regions in the video, but if you went through and opened it on the trimmer, and as a matter of fact, we'll just do that to this one here. Let me open in trimmer. So I got my little trimmer window here, and I say I want to take this section here, and we'll call it deploy. From when he first throws it, region, we'll call it deploy, and we'll save that in the file. And so now you can see back here on the timeline, there's a little deploy, a little region on the timeline. Now I'll go off and say embedded regions to subclips, and we'll click apply, and then go over to my project media, and I now have a deploy, which is a subclip that just shows that little section. Boom. So just some handy conversion tools for markers and regions and subclips in Ultimate S. You've seen we've used remove markers extensively. You can remove a whole bunch of things at once, right? Command markers, region markers. However, this is kind of interesting. Remove every N. And what this is for is sometimes you'll drop markers and you placed more than you really need. So you might have dropped markers in double time, and then you decide that you really don't want that many markers and you want to delete every other marker. So this is a way that you can quickly, we'll deploy a couple of markers here. Let's go and remove all the regions first. So all of our regions are gone. I'll come over to create markers, and I'll say create a marker every beat, or maybe let's say every 2 beats. So that would be 2 markers per measure. And we click apply. So now we got markers every 2 beats, and we might say, gee, we really didn't want them every 2 beats. I really wanted them every other beat, so I can come over to remove, and I could say remove every other marker. And then if we watch down here, when I click apply, every other marker goes away. If I click it again, every other marker goes away, right? So it just keeps thinning out the markers. Every other marker because I said every 2. I could have said every 3rd, every 4th, however you want to delete the markers. That brings us to our edit section here, where we can edit markers. The first thing is split events at markers. So now, if I have markers on the timeline, I want to split the event at each one of those markers. I will select the event, say split events at markers, click apply, and what you can see has happened on this timeline is every time there's an event that's under a marker, not only the one that I selected, but all the events. So this one works across the whole timeline. It has split the event at the marker so that I can go do something with that event. Or maybe you want to apply an effect or something to that event. Likewise, we can do split events at embedded markers. So if we had embedded markers in this file, we can go split it. Now, this is really interesting for when you're mapping music. I use this a lot when I map music. So let me move this up here to this audio file, and let me clear the markers so we just it's just a little bit easier to understand what's going on. So I'm going to remove the markers remove every marker from the file here. Remove entire project, apply. Okay, now they're all gone. I have an audio file, and this audio file has embedded in it markers that happen to be at every measure. And maybe what I want to do is I want to chop up this audio file by the measure. So we'll clear page and say a split event at embedded markers. And now when I click apply, that audio file instantly got chopped up by all the embedded markers that were in the file. Okay, so you can see it's got chopped up into smaller and smaller pieces. Okay, we can renumber markers. So let me undo a couple of. You'll notice that I've got markers in here. This is 1, this is 17, this is 33. Sometimes people like their markers to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for whatever reason, and that's okay. We have the ability to renumber the markers. So we'll say renumber markers, click apply, and now the markers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, renumbered just as you would expect. I can also change the distance between the markers a relative amount. Sometimes you want to move all the markers in. So let's say, I drop these markers for whatever purpose, and I really want them to all be in a little more. So I want to do this. I want to take the marker, I want them to all come in by like the same amount, right? So you're moving these things, and the problem with that is if I move them all over by 5, I move this one over by 5, I got to move this one by 10, I have to move this one by 15 frames, right, to keep them all relative. And so this is a quick way of moving them a relative amount. So I'm going to say I'm going to move them all 5 and by 5 seconds in a relative amount, and I click apply, and they all come in, right? That relative, keeping the duration between them. Maybe 5 seconds was a little too much to demonstrate this, so let me bring them in 1 second there, like they were, and we'll do that. Apply, and they all jump over by 1 second, and see they kept their spacing, right? So it's just a way to nudge the distance between the markers over a little bit. Now we can also delete between markers, and this is handy when you're going through your video, let's say, and you're dropping markers where you kind of want. Here's a good video, found it. Here's a good thing, and then I want to delete between them. And so we've got a couple of markers here. I'm going to say delete between. I'll click apply, and then you can see that between these two markers and these two markers, it went off and deleted. It didn't delete the last one because there wasn't an ending marker there. There's also an option to ripple events. So let's undo this and use delete between and ripple events. And what it will do is move all the media down and ripple the events in. So now I've deleted between the markers and I've moved them all down. Now we can do the same thing within regions, because sometimes let me clear all these markers here. Clear the page. Go up here, remove all the markers. Okay. What I want to do now is I want to create some regions. So here's a region, and this is, you know, this intro that I want to keep, and this is some good footage here, or whatever, and I create a number of regions. I can go say keep remove within regions, so I can decide I like the stuff that's in the regions, I want to keep those. So we say keep inside regions, we say apply, it deletes everything that's outside of those regions. Alternately, I can say delete what's inside. Maybe I was putting regions around things I didn't want. This was footage I didn't want. I click apply, it deletes the things that are inside the regions. And also, again, there's the ripple events. So whether I'm deleting inside the regions or outside, it will get rid of all the gaps on the timeline and move all that down. So we'll do that once with the keep inside, delete inside, once with the keep inside. You can see it keeps all those and it moves them all down. And finally, the last one is a go to marker. Let's go back to our load save marker tool, and we'll get markers from a file. Oh, and it doesn't know where that file is, and I put it on my desktop, I believe. So let's go back to my desktop here and find that. In retrospect, desktop wasn't the best place I could have put that, but here it is, markers. And I'm going to click apply. And now I can scroll in here and I'm going to say go to marker. And it shows me all of my markers. If I don't have names, it would just show me the marker numbers. And I say, oh yeah, it was this particular marker here because it had some intelligent name. And I click OK, and it immediately scrolls the timeline over to that marker and places the cursor at that particular marker. So there you go, chapter 89, which was marker 26. So that's all the functionality that's in the marker tab. Lots of things you can do, loading and saving them, creating them, deleting them, converting them, editing them, making subclits at them, just a whole bunch of marker tools that'll make you more productive. Well, hopefully this has given you a pretty good idea of what Ultimate S Lite can do for you. Now it's time to add your creativity. If you have any questions, you could always contact us at ultimatesupport@vast.com. And if you don't have Ultimate S Lite yet, you can download it from our website. Until next time, thanks for watching.